to Horseshoe Bay. We did a double.
This is what I've been waiting for.
The
whole episode has been leading toward this for me.
We made you wet, but we're here.
You go first.
I don't. Where do we begin? These are. I know every week I just start with I love the show. It's just we have Nancy going just tunnel visioned on getting Everett and bringing him down. So much so that she's kidnapped him in Lucy Saple's house.
Full circle.
Yes.
She's like, I'm taking you to the scene of the crime, my man. And she is just dead set.
And she had time for an impeccable outfit too. She really she's exceptional. And I was like, you look so good. And I'm also so scared of you right now. And Everett should be too. I like that the two, Kennedy McMahon, I'm sorry, I don't know Everett's actor's name, but the two of them were just masterclass.
On fire.
Just trading off of one another. It was just I just cannot care for Everett. But he's such a delicious villain. He just even rumpled and bruised and looking at his granddaughter, who we just learned that's his granddaughter. That man acts as if he's on a throne. And he doesn't have cuffs on.
So steely, giving her nothing, no emotionless. He learned his wife died, and he's like, I didn't do it. And it's like, can you show some shred of emotion, guy? What's happening?
And it's like he did not have control in that situation, and yet he conducted himself and Nancy as though he did have control of the situation. Absolutely glorious moment when she said, I'm not, what was it? I'll take your silence as a yes. And then he threw that back at her a few moments later. And I was like, he knows how to get himself out of this situation.
Was that when she stopped the recording?
Yeah. She gave up because she's like the Nancy Drew approach, or is it the Nancy Drew approach? Can we call it that? She went into darker territory. Whatever kind of route she was going was not working on him. He was a different kind of evil than the supernatural threat she's dealt with, and she didn't know how to burrow through that. And I just thought that was, like you said, the dynamic between the two of them, the back and forth, that made that scene so rewatchable, dare I say, because there was no getting out of it for either one of them, and yet they were happy to trade blows there.
The aspect of the story that I loved so much, there was so much going on. It was so wrought, but she leans on both of her dads in different ways. That was so heartwarming to me. She and Ryan are building this relationship seemingly as friends. They're building a friendship, and he can help her in ways that she can't really go to Carson with. But when it's all said and done, and not to fast forward too much, but when it's all said and done and she does see Carson, that's when she crumbles. She once again feels really safe with Carson, and she can be vulnerable and cry and open up to him. And I loved that scene so much, because we've been working toward that, I think, the whole season, and there is more payoff in the finale, but we'll get there. But that was another aspect where she came up with that plan with Ryan, and we find out at the end where, what we saw, as always with the show, what we see is not the whole story, because Nancy's a sly girl. But I loved seeing that partnership with, outside of her friend group for this episode. She was partnered with Ryan. I think that was another big payoff that we needed from her arc this season.
And it was an interesting switch, because if I recall correctly, in the episode beforehand, wasn't Ryan on the other side, because the two of them were investigating the same storyline together, but separately in their own ways. So it was said a lot that Ryan was the one that tracked her down. He knew her better than she thought, because he was able to track her down to Lucy Sable's house. And I totally agree. I feel like they're starting to build. She's recognizing Ryan as her father, but she will always see Carson as her dad. And I just think that the dynamic, the separate dynamics between the two of them is just amazing. But also on top of that, I can't remember if we saw it much in this episode. I don't think we did, so I'll save the discussion for the next episode when we get into it. But the relationship between Carson and Ryan is starting to really blossom as well. They both have the shared goal of looking after Nancy, and I just think that all three sides of that triangle is coming together lovely in this finale. Let's just call it a double finale, because it felt like one episode went into the next. It was just every episode spills into from one into the other, and I feel like Nancy's coherent storytelling has never faltered, and certainly wasn't the case in these episodes.
I think that with Ryan and Nancy, what's great about the way that this starts, for the two of them at the back of the season, is that the connection is grief. If they're like, Celia dies, and there are two people that love her enough to go after Everett. Like that, to know that it is that her death has weight. Like there were people that cared about her, and I think to allow ferocity in that, right? Like Ryan comes in angry, fist flying. Like it's a visceral reaction, and it's the same like reaction that Nancy has to learning what she thinks is that Everett killed her grandmother. That we, instead of fist, it's a taser. But the first reaction is violence, and I think that is a natural reaction, which is why I think when they reveal, is it in this episode or is it in the next one? But about the wraith, I didn't like that the wraith was the reason they were giving for a lot of her behavior, and I was like, no, because she went through a lot. She could still have these feelings. It didn't have to be implied that it was the wraith. Even with the tasing, I was like, I accepted it. She went to the dark side. She was traumatized and she had grief. I get it. But it gives reason to, I guess they were trying to lend reason to Nancy acting out of character. And I was like, well, grief will have you do that. A supernatural being doesn't have to.
Yeah, I didn't necessarily need a separate reason for Nancy's behavior. And I also would be interested in someday rewatching with this knowledge to kind of see if, like we just talked about with Wendy, like, was this a retroactive decision? Was this like another thing they were just like, oh, that would be a really good way to tie up the stories, to have this thing from the beginning have like been attached to her all season and kind of took her down this road. But I want to see if there were hints, because they showed us the montage of like moments where the wraith like intervened in her behavior. But I would just be so interested to go back to see if, like, as a viewer, did we miss those moments? Were there like hints of them, or was that just like a convenient like way to tie it together? I'm no judgment either way. Like it worked for me, as much as I was like, yeah, we didn't really need it, but like, cool. That's another way of putting it. It did feel super similar in a way to what George has been going through, so it's kind of like another one. But the stakes were a lot more dire much more quickly with the wraith.
I know, I agree. I feel like from a character standpoint, Nancy's always had a bit of a she seems to walk that morally grey area where she's maybe made some decisions that were questionable and then realised and learned from it. So it's quite interesting that now we have a reason for why her latest batch of morally questionable decisions, it kind of works, because she did make a lot of progress, and then throughout the season you kind of see now, looking back, she did start regressing and make more questionable decisions. Because like for example, people were talking her out of her relationship with Gil, and yet she always reached out to him when she needed something dark done, because she knew he wouldn't question that. That kind of encouraged that. So yeah, it does feel like there could have been a bit of retroactive rewriting done, but at the same time, I think the storyline was moving in the right direction, that they got away with it. And then the montage, I was surprised they did that. I was like, oh, that's pretty clever when you saw it, because there were a lot of instances throughout the season that they showed. So it came together nicely, even if it wasn't necessary, if that makes sense. But I will say I do like the fact that it became about the wraith, not solely, I didn't like that, but this, I feel like the finale, or the setup of the finale, gave it a very like Buffy-esque quality, because if I recall correctly, I think season 4 of Buffy had a season-long story and then wrapped that up in the penultimate episode, and then a season finale was very much like standalone but like show oriented. That's what this felt like. It was like the Everett story, the Hudson story, was very much the main story of the season, and they practically wrapped that up in the penultimate episode. So they gave Nancy a reason to need to deal with her feelings by making it a supernatural thing that they can deal with in a standalone episode. But it wasn't completely standalone, because it tied back to, was that the premiere or the actual premiere where the wraith showed up? I can't remember.
It was season 2 premiere.
It was so they tied it in very, very well, especially since that wasn't supposed to be the original premiere because of the pandemic. So they tied it back very, very well. The start of season 2 led right through to the end of season 2. I think it all came together really nicely, and I appreciated what they did, because we always say Nancy tries something different, and this was very, very different compared to what it had done so far.
It's funny that you mentioned the Buffy comparison because that's a thought that I had watching these episodes. It's like people have always compared the show to Riverdale, and it might have some of the same like visuals. It's northeastern small town, like it looks very stuck in a certain time period when the town like became like a, you know, a lot of trauma in these towns, and they're stuck in that time period. They look very like a little bit older, you know, like Riverdale's like got that 50s motif, and Nancy's got a, I don't know, whatever it is.
The
It just looks a little bit,
70s.
yeah, a little
Mhm.
like a they're stuck in the 80s a little bit.
Mhm.
Less so in the wardrobe, but more so. I'm way off task. What was I even saying?
The set
Buffy.
production, but
Buffy. I was like, this reminds me of like Buffy and also like Stranger Things a little bit. Like these episodes went really like above and beyond to what I think they had in the past. Like it was like she went full upside down, not to get into the finale already, but it's funny that you mentioned Buffy because that was something I was picking up on in these episodes.
I think we can scoot into the finale and just hop back to episode 17 things when we need to, because I feel like it is, Michael's right. They are sort of like a two-parter. It all kind of works together, even with the Hudson stuff being wrapped up. Well, the Hudson stuff was not wrapped up. Part one of the Hudson problems was wrapped up. Then she had a whole other ancestral problem going on. But I think that like I do see, I've never seen Buffy, so I can't speak to that one, but I do see the Stranger Things elements, particularly in the storytelling around Nancy's trauma and that umbilical cord and all the Nancy's past that they did. Which, by the way, that sequence, like, it reminded me of when she had to break free of the world she created, in which she and everybody else that she cared about was happy, but like turned up the dial even higher to her actually having to once again confront the trauma that she keeps pushing down. And I love that all of her friends show up in those moments, and they bring their history with them, and her history with them as well, into her having to confront her different moments in life that changed who she was as a person, that also made her kind of lose her identity as well.
It was like a traumatic Wizard of Oz, and I loved it. Like
It's beautiful.
it was a great way for Nancy to understand like you can't do it alone, and all these people that you have in your life have played a part, and just her, I guess, conjuring them up, because I don't think they knew that happened, right?
No, they didn't.
I don't know. Her conjuring up, they each provide something in her life that's necessary, whether she recognizes it or not. And I knew Ace was going to be last. I knew he was going to be last.
This is a really emotional scene between the two of them too.
Yeah.
And the double entendre of her asking him to hold her. I mean, she means baby her, but like, oh, the shot around them when when she hands him infant her, and they're just there, and their foreheads are together, and they're having a little romantic moment.
I just got chills because thinking about that line again, like discussing it out loud, when she asks him, "Can you hold me?" and he says, "I've been waiting for you to ask me that," or something. And it kind of like I'm getting chills. I always get chills when I talk about the show. He's kind of always been there to hold her, to lift her up, to be there, but she's never asked. He's always just been there. So oh my God, I'm gonna cry. Like that's so deep. Like she's finally asking him can you be there can you hold me? Oh my God, I'm literally gonna cry. That's so
It's
intense.
beautiful. It is.
Oh my God. But can we talk about the Nick one when she's in the grave? I feel like we had a commenter say that there was a moment or something, or I feel like once I saw it, I was like, oh, I feel like someone had told us about this, when she says that's why it hurt so much when you chose George. In my mind, I'm like, is that how it went down? Like, I feel like maybe that's not how it completely went down. But then I remembered, like, we're in deep in Nancy's psyche, where she's been like pushing things down. So maybe even if she didn't communicate fully, that's how it felt when Nick and George got together. Somewhere in her, that's how it felt, that he was, he's choosing George over her because, she can't provide what George can. So I had to really do a lot of work in that scene to really do some critical thinking. Not that it didn't work. Like, I think if you think about it, it really works. But I had to like, I had to sit with that for a minute and be like, how did I feel about that in context and everything?
I feel like with them too, there's been a lot of like vague history because like at the end of the day, we're going right back to the pilot for a dynamic that had been established before that. And he was there for her to help her get through a traumatic period of her life. But using's the wrong word, but she used the happiness she felt around him to get over that, but she never really treated him right. And I think that if I recall correctly, when she noticed that and when she was finally ready to make it official, he was like, I can't do this anymore. So I think maybe that's why then she felt upset then that he was able to move on with George right around the time she was ready to give him what he needed, but she treated him wrong. So I feel like that was like kind of like a beautiful farewell to the like will they won't they dynamic with Nick, because we knew Nick's moved on and he's happy with George, but the show never really moved on from it. Whereas I feel like now that Nancy's ready to officially move on from it, that's kind of what that scene was. I agree with you. There was a lot of heaviness and powerful stuff in that one conversation that you probably need to sit with it for a couple of minutes or hours afterwards, knowing the show just to fully digest it. But beautiful scene nonetheless.
Yeah, I love how they ended it.
I was like, I get to eat again. Like, I was really interested for yes, but I mean, like, I think it's a great metaphor for we keep doing metaphors for the end of the relationship. I think, but I think it is because it is difficult to let go of a future with somebody when you know that it would have worked had you been in the right frame to accept the love that they were giving and to give them the love they deserve back. And I think for Nancy, a fear of hers was losing Nick. Like, because she
says, thank you for still being my friend.
Yes, because she needs him in her life. They have the type of love that, regardless of what their relationship is, she needs him in her life, and she's willing to accept that in any capacity. Whatever he needs from her, which in this case, it's friendship, to be a good friend to her, and for her to be a good friend to him, she will do it. And I think that was a way of, once again, sunsetting Drusen by literally putting her in a grave, right? We're literally in a graveyard as she moves forward. Oh, metaphor. She's in a graveyard with Nick, and she's putting her feelings away. She's exploring those feelings, and he is embracing her. She
climbing out of them
too. Out of the grave, and he's hugging her, and she thanks him for being her friend, and then for being her friend. And then we move to Ace, right? He's on a cliff where she was born. Life. We go from death to life. It's the end of a relationship to the beginning of a new one. I think, God, I love these writers, but I mean, that's a way to not. I think there's a way to move her forward while paying respect to what her relationship with Nick was like, but allowing her to open up to what she's been repressing, which is her feelings for Ace. Which is why when she ends up on that doorstep and he's not there, I was like, oh, girl.
Like, no. I wanted him to, like, there was a part of me that wanted him to, like, I guess not leave Amanda, because that would be that's not an Ace thing to do. He wouldn't just leave her, but I don't know. I wanted it to somehow work out. I'm glad it didn't, because I guess it's better storytelling, just not because we want it doesn't mean we need it right away, we need to continue to work for this. But yeah, that was like, of course. But she got the cookies, and she has her dad's, which I thought that was another touching moment too.
Well, that, and Nate's got like one last crumb. He says, I think I left something behind. I said, yeah, that's Nancy. Follow the feeling.
You need to ditch your Bobsy. I've already canceled the Bobsy twins, by the way. Which hurt because I feel like they were really fun, but I was like, oh, Gil, you let me down. And Amanda, you just don't care about Ace.
No, she doesn't. I think that like I didn't like that. It was like, I was only in a relationship with you because of the rape. I was like, that's not why she was in a relationship with him, but I'll just let the writing have that one. But I think it is true that part of the toxic element of their relationship is that he is controlling and he can be verbally abusive.
Yeah.
And she let it slide because she was in a dark place herself. And he does that exact same thing to Amanda, but Amanda won't leave her relationship with her brother or put boundaries up between them. She doesn't know how to do that because she's never had to, which makes me feel like Ace and Amanda, y'all not gonna be around for, because even though he prioritized her, and that's what she loved about that, she's not ready to be able to walk away from her brother. in a healthy way. It's like you're gonna get it for like maybe 2 days into that trip, and then Gil's gonna call, and she's gonna go right back to her Shoe.
Yeah, I
Okay,
know.
wait. Can we, not to like turn us in a completely different direction, but Odette's done, right? George is fine.
For now, they still gotta remove her because she's only got 10 years to live, so
Yeah.
they gotta
It
get
was
rid of
like so
Odette.
confusing to me. I kind of felt like they were like, let's just be done with this and let Odette like go into the depths of George and her. I thought she was gonna be like, oh my gosh, my lifeline. And I also was like, is the kiss with Bess gonna like release? Oh, like that's what Odette needed, is to like
Oh,
have
that would be
love
nice.
again, to be like just
Mm.
release. I was like, can we just like let Odette be gone? I thought that's what that was. I guess it wasn't fully. It had more weight for Bess, which I was not completely buying into,
Mm.
if I'm honest. But fine, everything else was great. We can have that be what it was. Like, I'm not gonna hold that against anybody. But I was expecting to see Odette like come out of George and just like evaporate into happiness in the afterlife.
It makes you wonder if that's going to become like an overall show arc, because with George's death's been foretold since the very first episode. It would be kind of poetic if it carries on now
She better
until
not
the
die
full
in the series
season. Oh,
finale.
we don't want that. No, that would be such a letdown. But I
No.
mean, like, now that Odette's in the background, I feel like it could end up taking a back seat and then come back up in the final season. And provided they overcome it and save George, I actually wouldn't mind that. I'm ready to move on from it so that she's not in instant trauma right now. But if it's something they want to bring back up towards the end so they can finally deal with that, it would be rather poetic that it's kind of like bookended both ends of the show. So I'm on board with that, provided it doesn't overwhelm George in season 3, because just had far too many near-death experiences for 2 seasons.
Yeah, now we've got Temperance.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you know what? I enjoyed her. Not
She
that
seems
bathtub
fun.
full of
Yeah.
blood, but she does seem. But she's gonna cause havoc, wreak havoc. It's
Yeah.
gonna be great. The way that that magic wall just drops down after she's like just
The
puts her
effects in
hands
this
up on it.
episode were crazy.
They were
Mm.
amazing. There's practical and CGI, right? Because I feel like the tree was something that they built on set that the rape was trapped in.
The umbilical cord corset looked like it was whoever that stand-in was for Kennedy, looked like she was in makeup for hours.
Right. No, it was so powerful, the whole thing, the whole like temperance part of it as well. And again, not to go back to Buffy, but the fact is, with Sabrina, one of the parts of Buffy is the reason these supernatural entities are attracted to Sunnydale is because there's something called the Hellmouth below it. And now it feels very much like Horseshoe Bay is the same kind of place. And we're learning more about it as we go on. There's something about it that draws all these creatures to it. And now it seems to be the source of Temperance's power, which is why the witches cut her off from it in the first place. But now the wall is down, she's back in there. So, and power outage in town, ghostly knocking on Nancy's door. So I feel like we're really heading into the supernatural territory in season 3, and I really can't wait to see what it is, especially since I feel like the town's going to become more of a character, and that's quite exciting.
It's gonna be a tight season 2, 13. Oh, it's gonna be so good.
It's gonna be, well, and that's why I'm glad that we waited till season 3 to do witches, because I feel like we had to do we had to do ghostly things first,
Yeah,
and
build
then
up to
bring
it.
magic into the equation.
One of my hopes for season 3 too is I don't need a complete tonal shift. I just do want Nancy to have a bit of a lighter time, because she's, she was through hell and back in season 2, and I don't want to see her suffer anymore from her past. Just as a fan, I care about her too much, and I'm like, at some point, we need to heal a little bit, and she just needs to, deal with other things a little bit. So I'm that's just my hope. I don't need like a complete like they don't need to go on like a cruise and like really go on vacation. I just need them to like, they all deserve a little, a deep breath and to have a little easier time.
Oh, hopefully that's what the setup is for why we went through this again with Nancy, because she does have that line about saying that she now has the ability to hold her trauma, and Ace tells her she always did, which again, the Ace was on point this episode.
I know, it was all like off screen too, and I feel like maybe if you didn't have the subtitles on and saw like Ace was saying all these things, I mean, we probably know what his voice sounds like by now, but it was cute that it was always him saying that stuff.
It was, and he was always also really there supporting her. If you noticed, the blocking was amazing. Like, it's not that all of her friends are around her, but he was the only one who tended to be touching her.
Held her hand.
Yes, the whole time. So lovely. Such a great
I
ship.
love it.
What else? I think. Oh, to go back to her dad's, I loved that Nancy sent Carson on with Ryan because she recognized that Ryan needed a dad right now, and like his dad is trash. So like it's just to go out take care of him, and then that he's now teaching him how to do domestic things as like Nancy looks on fondly but also laughing.
That's really cute.
It's adorable. I to think about where we were in season 1 to where we land by the end of season 2, that is a journey.
Yeah. Hard fought.
Yeah, and we always said Ryan was that character who had potential for good, but always kind of leaned on the side of bad. He just needed those positive influences in his life, and I think he's finally found them.
He seems so well-intentioned. He just didn't have the tools in his upbringing to fully realize that. You know, you're hindered by your circumstances, and while he had incredible luxuries, he didn't have the luxury of family, like a real family. And while, you know, Nancy's like trying to reconcile her family situation, I think she recognizes like, I do have like a family. I was the lucky one. Like my biological father doesn't know how to be a dad, and that's okay because I have a dad. And he's enough for all of us. It's just also like poignant and like layered, and I could talk about it for hours.
I know. Even the side plots, like the I loved, I mean you could kind of see the writing in episode 17 because we had to get Nick away from the big plot around Nancy because we had to see the stuff for the youth center. So George is like, it's a best emergency. I'll take care of it, you know, and like so he can go off and do his thing. But I loved his little standoff with Jake, the cafe owner.
Obsessed. Obsessed. Like as much of a journey as Nancy was on, I think Nick has been on a journey this season too, of like fully realizing his own power. And I think it's a payoff from, I don't remember what episode, but was it the previous episode? Of just realizing in his community, like he doesn't have to like back down to these people. Like he's proud of who he is. And I love when he was like, I'm rich. And I was like, you say it. You've earned it, Nick. Yeah, he's right in that guy's face. I loved it.
Yeah. And he's
rotten hell.
R.I.P. No, but
hate him.
He's not being apologetic for who he is anymore. Nick was so always like treated things with such like a gentle nature, and we do love that about him. But he's so fully at home with everything about himself, because you know at the start he wasn't sure whether his mom or his dad approved of his lifestyle, and like. Look at him now. He's just thriving. And the fact that he was able to get Tamura's help in the situation and that they follow through on Tamura's promise to do better and everything.
Yeah, that was payoff too.
Yeah. Yeah. Wonderful.
Nick was like, I'm not going to let you forget that you said that.
Yeah.
I'm like, good for you, Nick.
He held him to that.
He did. And I think there's just great messaging there about not only because he knows what it's like to be considered someone that society shouldn't care about. You know, there's assumptions made about his time spent in jail, and he's thinking about these kids and the way that people talk about them, right? Like Jake is like, what does it matter if it's in the other town? And he's just like, because they belong here. Like they don't like not belong to the community because you don't approve of their choices. Like the point is to intercede in their bad choices so that they can have a better life and make better choices that'll put them on a good path. And like the fact that Jake didn't want to help with that, I was like, Jake, you can have your reservations about like safety, but that it shouldn't be like, oh, well, I need to keep the town traditional. And like it's always been.
We know what that means.
You know, like it was just not. It was not okay. So when Nick was like, I bought the building across the street, it's 50 feet away. And you can say nothing. Oh, and I'm putting a cafe in it.
Oh yeah, icing on the cake.
I loved the arc of it too, because at first Nick was like trying to be very diplomatic and like appeal to him, but Jake was still trying to bulldoze him and be racist. And Nick, in that middle part, he was just like, I don't know what to do. Like I'm stuck between a rock and a hard place. And then he was just like, you know what? No, I have money. Sometimes money can be a solution if you put it and bet on it in the right places. And he's betting on his community. And I hope Jake goes out of business.
I hope so. I hope so. Just run him out of business altogether. But last Nick point, Nick and George, do we think the proposal is actually her wanting to move forward in life, or do we think it was a trauma response to knowing that her lifespan is maybe 10 more years?
I think maybe both can be true, because I don't think she would have had those thoughts if she didn't have like a potential expiration date. Maybe that was a way to help her realize like, oh, I kind of do want these things. So I don't think it would have happened without her realizing that.
Yeah, I feel like on one hand you could perceive this in the way. I remember Sabrina Barry's early proposal to Iris in The Flash to change the future, which did not go down too well. And like you could perceive it like that, like Reed said, a trauma response to try to change something and like live in the moment right away. But at the same time, I feel like the relationship is strong enough. I just wish we'd seen more of it, but I feel like the relationship is strong enough that they would have gotten to that point at some point. So maybe she is caught up in the moment, and sometimes maybe it's better to live in the moment. So I'm eager to see where they go with this storyline in season 3, because I can see all sides of it. So whichever one they choose, I'm on board with.
Okay, because I'm on the fence about it. I'm like, I could see it. Their relationship has always sort of been on a fast track. I mean, they own a business together. They're living together now. They clearly are building them in a way that they want them to have a future together. So the proposal didn't necessarily, it seemed out of place in the sense that you're right, Reed, it was not something that she would have done had she not had an expiration date, even though she did admit that she'd been thinking about their life down the road. But I guess it was closer to that 10-year mark when she thought that they would get married. But I am so intrigued by the fact that they didn't have him answer.
I know, that's what I was just gonna say. We know Nick is a very logical man. Like I think he's gonna raise some points. But I feel like that's always how it goes with proposals in season finales or cliffhangers, that the other person like will rarely say yes. But I'm also thinking back to the Gilmore Girls season 5 finale when Rory steals the boat and Lorelai is just like, my life is a mess, and she proposes to Luke because that's like the only thing that she can, like, that's what she has left. That's her second strongest relationship. And they actually, like, he says yes, and I think they try to get married in the season 6 premiere or something, or like, I don't know. I remember them breaking into dozies and like trying to get like Zima or something. But I don't know. Maybe Nick will be like, whatever, let's do it. I don't know. I do think it might not be for the complete right reasons, but I mean, you only live once. I guess George has it right. I don't know.
It'll be interesting to see. I mean, I'm glad we don't have to wait.
Maybe we'll have our answers next week.
Maybe. I hope so. I wonder if they will do a time jump, or if we're gonna go right into like literally right after, maybe the day after the season finale ends.
You guys are gonna try to have to like hold me back, because we're gonna talk on Monday and be like, I already finished season 3.
13 episodes. I'm
I
sorry.
can do that in a weekend.
Yep, actually you could.
I won't. I promise.
40 minutes each episode.